All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. So we're really excited to be taking today's virtual field trip. We've got classrooms joining us from across North America, classrooms joining us in Canada, classrooms joining us in the US for today's special event. So we're really lucky today. We are going to be hanging out with Lucy Barnard today. She set off on a 40 million step mission to become the first woman to walk across the world, so top to bottom, starting down in South America and then walking all the way up to the top of North America. So she's been on the road for a while now, and now she is just outside of Quito in Ecuador. And Lucy, I'm going to let you take over for a little bit because I think you'll be the best one to share your story and tell your story. So we're excited to get to know you, excited to meet you and learn about your journey so far.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, have you got a photo of me up? Can you see that?
Yeah, Lucy, it was up. I think we might have lost Lucy for a second, boys and girls. So we're just going to wait a moment and see if she can jump back in. She did a share screen for us, just started it. Then I think things might have froze on her end. So let's give her a minute.
I got booted off.
That's okay. We see you're back in. Why don't you try that screen share again, Lucy?
Okay, it's just saying that it's trying to start.
Yeah.
And then if I pull this up, can you see my PowerPoint? I can still hear you, that's good. No? Okay, I might have to just reinitiate. 1 second.
Yeah.
Not start screen share while the other participant is sharing.
Oh, I think what's happening is it has you in the event twice. So let's see. I'm going to stop the sharing from the original one there. Now try sharing and see if that'll work for us.
Okay. No, it's still. Okay, I'm going to do a hard close of the app and rejoin.
Sure. All right. So boys and girls, we'll just wait for a second for Lucy to join us. Unfortunately, technology can be tricky sometimes. So Lucy is not in her normal home. She's in Quito, in Ecuador. And so she has to use her cell phone to join us today, which I think is why she's having a little trouble doing the share for us.
The internet's great. It's just still got me in here twice, I think.
Yeah. And you tried a hard close of the app and that didn't work? All right. Well, we're gonna figure this out. Unfortunately, it has Lucy in here twice, and it won't let her do the share. So.
Oh, I know. Maybe if I get rid of you. Aha. Let's try.
Okay, I think we're getting there. I think we're getting closer. Yes. Yeah. Hit Zoom.
Am I in?
Yeah, I can see the PowerPoint coming up. All right. Yeah, and sideways, beautiful. We got it.
Okay, good. I'm gonna go straight into it. Just recently, I was very lucky to have a filmmaker come and join me for a section in Peru, and he's put together a little introduction. So here we go. So suddenly we can see. I will walk 30,000 kilometres over 5 years and 15 countries. That distance is the equivalent of 1/6 of what a person will walk in their lifetime. My name is Lucy Barnard, and I'm making an attempt to become the first woman to walk the length of the earth. Okay, so that should give you an introduction to what we're doing, and we are trying to make a film because this is a historic event, so we want something that's able to keep it in the history books so that people in the future can look back and see when and how it all happened. So about once every couple of months, I try and have a filmmaker join me so that we can collect the footage that's needed for this film. So what does it mean walking the length of the world? Well, on your screen now, you should be able to see a map of the very bottom of South America. And that town there, Ushuaia, is in Argentina, and that is where I began my walk. So I will press play on this, and it's going to show you a trail of exactly where I'm walking and how I am achieving this expedition. So it starts at the bottom there and went all the way through Chile and occasionally into Argentina, and then I passed through a desert, and I'm currently in Ecuador. Next year, I'm going to pass into Central America and up through Mexico, and my final year will be going through the United States, Canada, and Alaska again, which will lead me to the top there in Barrow. So that's a 30,000 kilometre journey. Now, a lot of people, when I explain what I do as a professional adventurer, have very different ideas from what I think it means to be an adventurer and to what they think. And I think this photo is a very good photo, along with the next one, of what my mum thought I was doing when I first began this expedition and became an adventurer. And this one as well. And now I would say that my mum has a better idea of what I do, but her friends certainly think that I'm hanging off cliffs and off ropes and partaking in dangerous activities. And certainly what I'm doing here is dangerous, actually, but because I'm really experienced in rock climbing and in being exposed to cliff faces and areas like this, for me it's not as dangerous as somebody who would just run along and approach this recklessly. Now I would say that this is what social media and the general public think of professional adventurers, people who get to look at beautiful places and have a really easy time about it, just living and basking in the wilderness. And this definitely does happen on occasion, but it is not always, and certainly is not the majority of my time. This is more realistic. So I spend a lot of time with a very heavy backpack on my back, hiking through areas, navigating, often in conditions that are not perfect, where it's cold, I can't see very well, and I have to be very careful or I can become lost. And this is what I thought I would be doing a lot of when I first started, and now this is definitely what my mum and my friends consider what I'm doing. But a big chunk of my time is actually spent doing this. So here I am in town. I walk 10 days in a row, and then I'll arrive somewhere and I have to find a new trail, figure out how many days away I am from the next town, how much food I'm going to need. Once I've found accommodation, I also need to clean all of my equipment and my clothes if I can. I need to make reparations if something's broken and it's not working. And then finally, before I leave, I need to prepare all of my storytelling for social media, and that's the business side of the work that I do, because if I'm not sharing my story, I'm not upholding my responsibility as someone who is trying to set a world record, and also not bringing the people along with me who've been supporting me as a community online. So how did I go from being a professional in the corporate world to being a professional adventurer? Did it just happen like this? Not at all. There was a lot of planning involved, but I will say that there's certainly not everyone is cut out to be an adventurer, and there are some activities that I really enjoyed doing that led me down this path. So for starters, when I was at school, I wasn't very skilled at the sports that they offer at school. I just was pleased to be involved. I was often a reserve. I didn't thrive in any particular way in races and sprints. But once I left school, I became involved in the rock climbing community, where I met many of my mentors, or people who are very good at what they do, who are willing to give me support. So here I am rock climbing, which I loved. I also did a lot of trekking here. I'm back down in Patagonia the first time that I visited, hiking across some glaciers. And here I am being very competitive in a cycling race. And actually in this particular race, I was first in both the female and male division. And then one day I came across this fellow and I thought to myself, what's his story? I learned that he became the first man to walk the length of the earth. I saw how he did it, which was quite primitive. He began in 1982. So he's wearing quite formal clothes, not clothes that we would consider to be sports clothes. He went through about 17 pairs of shoes. He had a little cart that he dragged behind him. And I don't think that flag was there all the time. I think that was more for this photograph. But certainly it got me thinking, you know, he started in 1982 and he was a very good multitasker. George Megan had a family while he was becoming the first man to walk the length of the earth. So there's his family, and here he is today. So he's quite old now. It's been 35 years since he completed that journey, which you can see next to him with the blue line. And I thought to myself, 35 years is a long time. Who else has done this walk? Who has hiked across the world? And here are some people. So the man on the left is currently in the United States. He's very close to finishing. And there are other people who have become quite famous from doing these expeditions. The man on the right is the second person to have completed the journey. And the man in the middle has become quite famous for his adventures right across the world. But you might notice something among these gentlemen, among these adventurers, which really stuck out to me. Can anyone tell me what that is? Hello?
They're all men.
Yeah.
Where are the girls?
Where are the girls? Where are they?
Americans.
Irritated me. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm a girl. I can walk in a straight line. I'm adventurous. And so this is what happened next. I began planning, and one day I said to my boss that I wanted to make an attempt to be the first woman to walk the length of the world. And you might think that typically your boss wouldn't be very supportive, but they really were. They all helped me get ready. They all made sure that I kept my routine of training and getting fit for the big expedition across the world. And one day I left work to begin this pursuit. And this is me walking. And I really, when I started, I thought it would be lovely that I'd have nice warm mornings, walking along a beautiful road or a beautiful trail. But as you can see here, it is beautiful conditions, but very steep, very difficult, very remote. And that's not all. Often the weather is really difficult. So here I am in a snowstorm about to cross a pass that will take me from Chile into Argentina. And not only is it really cold and full of snow, but it was also very windy. So I had a lot of trouble navigating and walking and staying warm. And I couldn't stop walking because I'd get really cold and my feet were wet. So there were a lot of things that I had to factor in and be very careful about so that I didn't get myself into a dangerous situation. So that's one thing that I really wasn't used to when I started. And here I am. Now, it looks like clear skies, but actually this is after the worst storm, the worst snowstorm in 20 years in Argentina. So here on this morning, it's minus 20 degrees Celsius. And I should have worked that out in Fahrenheit because you probably are more familiar with that. But for me, this would be 20 degrees colder than what I was used to before I left. So before this big storm, there was no snow whatsoever. And when I woke up in the morning, I came out of my tent, this is what it looked like. So I'd actually set my tent up, not on the road, I was quite a way away. And when I crawled out of my tent, the snow was up to my waist and I had to make my way back to the road. And fortunately, after a few days, the workmen had come and cleared the road so that cars could get through again. But indeed, it was really, really cold and not something at all that I was prepared to deal with. But of course, you have to, and I got through safely. And here it's very early in the morning, so there's a lot of beautiful colours, and I'm really grateful to have been able to experience this, even though it was really difficult. So I also wasn't used to living in a tent. And there are some things that happen when you live in a tent. Like, for example, the tent can get wet and so can all of your gear. And you have to, instead of making your bed every morning, you have to break it down, roll it up, and then roll up your tent and put that all together with your equipment so that it's ready for the afternoon when you have to build your house again and make your bed again. So here I am in my tent, and you can see in the middle picture there is a very small backpack. Everything I own fits into that backpack, and if my tent is wet, it sits on the very top. And you can see me there sitting inside my tent. And something that happens when you live in a tent and when you're carrying everything that you own is that weight becomes very important. So what you're seeing on screen is almost everything that I own. I only have 2 sets of clothes. The one that I'm wearing while I'm drinking a cup of tea is my clothes that I wear when I'm walking. And then the clothes that I'm sleeping in on the other side of the photo are the clothes that I wear at night. And that's really important because I need to be dry at night so that I don't get very, very cold or become sick from exposure. And then the other thing you might notice is that there is a stove there as well. So all of that has to fit within my backpack. So it's not just a matter of weight, but it's also a matter of space. And here you can see what happens when it's been a wet day, or more commonly, my clothes are wet because I walk 35 kilometers a day and sweat all day from the hard work of carrying my backpack. So here you can see that I found a shelter, not completely rainproof, so I've still had to set up my tent. And I'm drying off my clothes, and you can see here, oops, maybe it won't work. Yes, here, there's a shadow on the tent. And that there is me trying to dry off all of the socks that I own. I have 3 pairs of socks because there's nothing worse than putting on wet socks in the morning. And I can tell you that every single morning that I get changed from my sleeping clothes back into my walking clothes, they are wet, and it's not rain, it's sweat, and it's really disgusting. The clothes smell and they're freezing cold because the climate where I'm situated at the moment is very cold. There's often snow. I just passed some snow a few days ago. So that is one of the most challenging parts, is getting up in the morning and facing the clothes that I have to wear. And that has other implications too when it's cold. So here, I just took these photos because I found it quite interesting. This is when I did have some accommodation in town, and you'll notice that on the stove there, all of the gas is alight, but only one kettle is on the stove, which seems very wasteful, especially from where I'm from. We're quite careful with our gas. But here they use the stoves and they turn all of them on and put them on the highest possible power so that they can heat the houses. That's what that's used for. And there is a tap where the water comes from, which is a really big pipe. And the reason that you can see it running is because if they turn it off, the pipe will freeze and no water will be able to get through. So they have to leave the water running at all time. And that also means that because there isn't hot water accessible so easily in some of the places that I'm at, that I often can't have a shower. And I thought it might be interesting for you to know how often I get to have a shower, because actually I'm living in a tent and I sometimes don't see a town for up to 2 weeks. And this year I've had on average 2 showers per month. So you can see straight away that maybe being an adventurer isn't exactly what social media or what photos in magazines like to portray. There's a lot more to it than these beautiful photos. So here I am outside in the snow making some coffee. And everything I eat, I either have to have pre-prepared in my pack or I have to cook it outside. And so here's some things that I often eat. Pasta, and if I can get salami, is really good for having lots of calories, but also protein, and making myself feel like I'm not very hungry, because I do go hungry a lot because I have to carry everything that I'm going to eat in a week. And then next to that is a hot chocolate and some form of sweet bread that I'm eating, a pastry as well. But also I've become really good over this time in foraging for food. So on the left, you can see some cherries. And then the little thing that I'm holding is called pan de árbol. So that's Spanish, and it means bread of the tree. So it's a mushroom and it tastes a lot like bread. And on the right, that's how it grows on the tree over those big knots or burrs on a tree. And then when they get porous, which is what you can see there, they kind of look like coral. That means you can no longer eat them. So they're, you can because they become not poisonous, but they not really edible. And so you have to be very careful about foraging for food, knowing that you've identified it correctly, and also that it's in season. And then here's another way that food comes to me. So this lady on the left, who is holding the most oversized piece of bread I've ever seen in my entire life, she is a lady who lives in an indigenous community down in Chile. And I walked past her little house and she gave me some bread on my way through, which is really generous of her. And then on the right is a bus driver, and I'd been walking past an area for a few days and they'd seen me. So they specially stopped to give me some water and some chocolate and some snacks, which is just incredible, because it can mean the difference between me having a very happy day or a very difficult day. And here again are some more people who've stopped to give me food. Here is a sandwich. If my mouth was closed, that sandwich was bigger than my head, and it had ham and cheese on it. So that was given to me by a lady, and this other lady gave me fruit. That's a dragon fruit. I don't know if you've seen that before, but it is a really delicious, one of my favorite fruits here in Ecuador. And a lot of this became more common a couple of years ago when I ended up in the media. So I did quite a few interviews on TV. I was in magazines and I was in newspapers. And this hasn't happened for maybe 2 years now. So I should really try and get in the media more, because when the community grows, the expedition for me becomes a lot easier, because people are willing to help me with just little things that you might take for granted on your day-to-day. So here are some people who found me or saw me in a shop, and they got very excited. and I wanted to take some photos because they didn't expect to see me, but they recognized me from my Instagram page, which is called Tangles and Tail. Now, does anyone know the significance of the name Tangles and Tail? It's the name of my blog. Anyone want to have a guess at what Tangles and Tail stands for?
I think it means you and your dog. You and your dog.
Totally. So you might have noticed that my hair is really, really, really out of control, and it's been that way my whole life. It's curly, and I'm not very interested in beauty routines. And so my hair is often in tangles, and then the tail belongs to my dog. So absolutely. So let's talk about Wombat. Here he is. This is my dog when he was 7 weeks old. So he joined my expedition as a puppy, and he knows no other life. He is 100% a dog living the life of adventure. So here he is next to the tent, and he's always been quite protective of our home, and watches over me more so at night than he does during the day. And here he is when he was a puppy in his favorite place, which was in a bag that became his bed. And so I used the bag on a cart to help him walk the long distances every day, because as a puppy, he was full of energy. He could walk 5 kilometers easily, but then the rest of the day he would want to sleep. So here he is. I put the bag onto the cart that I used to help me get through the desert, because I needed to carry extra water and extra food and extra safety equipment. And as you can see, as we go to the right, he grew and grew and grew and became too big for the cart. So he eventually started walking right next to me. And here he is today. So there he is. The cheeky blue heeler is the breed name. So the other name is Australian cattle dog. And these dogs were bred specifically in Australia. They have part dingo in them, which is the wolf of Australia, and a few other different breeds. And this was developed over 100 years ago to deal with really hard terrain and dangerous cattle. So cattle that were aggressive. And these dogs are very strong. They can run all day, and they will bite the cattle if they need to get them to move and to keep themselves safe. So when he got to this size, well, he's an adult, so he has to work too. He has to start pulling his own weight. So here we are. We passed this volcano last week. You can see that there's snow on the top. And even though I'm so close to the equator in the middle of the world, because I'm up so high in altitude, it's still very, very cold. So he has a backpack that he carries. And on the right side, you can see the things that he tends to have in that bag. So he can carry food and water, a lid, a jacket for him for when it's really cold at night, a bowl, which usually has some food for snacks for him during the day, and then a whole bunch of lollies. And you might think that I'm the one that eats those lollies, but actually I tend to give him one every time I put the backpack on to reward him. And you normally can't give dogs lots of lollies and sugar and treats, but because he exercises so much, for him it's okay. It's an exception. And he also carries 2 more things. He carries the pegs for my tent so that I can access them very quickly and keep track of them, because if I lose pegs, that's a real problem for me. And he also carries my rain clothes so that I can access them quickly without having to open my backpack and allow the rain to come into my backpack when rain suddenly appears here. And here, the rain, there'll be no rain, it'll be beautiful and sunshiny. And then 5 minutes later, I'll be getting hailed on. So the weather really changes quickly. So life with Wombat looks a lot different. It's far more enjoyable for me, and I have a lot more peace of mind for my safety because I am on my own. And I take a lot more breaks and look after myself better because I also have the responsibility of a dog to look after too. And so as you can see, he's not always out of the tent, and sometimes it's a bit snug, but we are hardly ever apart. And here, where it's very isolated and I used to be on my own following this, you can see behind me here, this is a very ancient road. It's the Incan Trail that I used to go all the way through Peru. So I would be very much on my own without company until Wombat joined me. And here life is much, much better with him. But of course, there are a few more logistics that I need to look after having Wombat here. But he makes things safer for me, and so did these items. So what you're looking at here is my beacon, and my beacon is how people track me, where they know where I am, and if I get into trouble, there is an SOS button that you should be able to see, which helps me, which I can use if I ever need rescuing, and it sends a signal to an international rescue group who then can coordinate rescuers. There's also a navigator and a battery which I use to keep all of these objects charged. But they can't help me with things like this. So here I have 2 sets of shoes that have broken, and shoes tend to last me about 700 kilometers. They often always fall apart before I have a replacement pair. And here is Wombat. Now, Wombat's never stolen any of my shoes, but he certainly loves finding shoes on trail. But life has become much easier for me now that there's a big community following me, because when people are traveling, they bring things for me from Australia or from wherever they're traveling from. And sometimes that includes a new set of shoes, which I always really, really appreciate, because where I am now in Ecuador, people are a lot shorter and their feet are smaller, so they don't sell shoes that are in my size for my feet to fit into them. So I absolutely have to get travelers to bring shoes in for me. So I thought I'd just show you some highlights before I finish up. So this is me in the desert. I'm going to show you some of the different climates that I've walked in. So we have one desert. On the left, I'm high up in altitude. I'm over 4,500 meters high, and it's quite cool, but there wasn't much wind this day. So I sat down and looked over this beautiful area and then discovered some hot thermal springs, which is not the water that you see, but it was just tucked around the corner. I could see the smoke coming up. And that was one of the rare occasions where I could swim and have a rest and get clean, because if I swam in the water that you can see there, I would almost certainly freeze. On the right, this is a beach in Chile. So we're back right down at 0 meters in altitude. Here is the volcano that I walked past last week, again, high in altitude. This is not a desert, but this is an arid land. And behind me, you can see I was walking to get to some water one day, and the water turned out to be a silt sump. So that's like a really fine mud that is liquid, that is impossible to drink. So I ran out of water and had a very, very horrible day that day, and was very worried about my safety, because of course I need water. Here I am passing through a high mountainous pass full of snow, and you can see here I have to be careful not to fall into frozen lakes. Here I am again in the world's largest desert. This is the Atacama Desert. And here's another highlight, which I absolutely love. I don't just get to speak to kids around the world. I get to find children in very remote areas and hang out with them and tell them all about my journey. And for these children, they live so remotely that it's very uncommon for travelers to come through and to learn about different ways of life. So they really, really appreciate spending time with people who have different stories and live lives so very different to the lives they live. And this is my life now. So here I am with Wombat every day. This is what we look like, where Wombat has his backpack on, I have my pack, and I'm making my way up very, very slowly all the way through to Alaska. So if this is something that you want to watch happen, you can keep an eye out. I mentioned before that I had that tracker or that safety beacon. So this maps out where I camp. Sometimes I can send messages to the map. And you can see all sorts of things about exactly where I walked. You can see a 3D picture here of the volcano that I showed you a photo of. That's also included in the map. And you get information also about the temperature and the winds and the conditions that I'm currently walking through and how slowly I'm walking if I'm in altitude and there's no oxygen for me to breathe. So I have to walk very, very slowly. And of course, you can follow this map maybe with your school, with your class, or with your family. And if you have permission, or if you can get help with your family, there's also lots of photos that go up on Instagram. But of course, you'll need to have your parents' permission. So that's it.
All right.
Alrighty.
Thank you so much for sharing those pictures with us. Those were incredible pictures. Looks like you're on an absolutely amazing journey. If you're ready now, we're going to start meeting some classrooms and they can start asking you some questions.
I'm absolutely ready. I can't wait to speak
All right.
to everybody.
Let's do it. So we're going to start off. We're going to go to Mrs. Wise's group, grade 6s joining us in Guelph, Ontario. Let me get their microphone turned on. How are we doing, grade 6s?
Okay, we have one question to start. So far, how much you walked?
I have walked 9,429 kilometers through 4 different countries.
But what's your favorite destination that you've walked through so far?
Oh, that's really very difficult because each country is so different. But I really did enjoy following the Incan Trail all the way through Peru. And I really love Ecuador as well because the food is so delicious and the people are very kind here.
All right. Awesome question to get us started. Let's jump to our next class. Mrs. Provenchere's class, they're joining us in Quebec. Looks like another grade 6 class. Let's get that microphone turned on. Oh, Mrs. Provenchere, if you're close to the computer, can you turn it on? I can't turn it on my end today.
My question is, have you ever been scared to die in your journey?
I've been in some fairly dangerous situations, but when you are in dangerous situations, or at least when I am, I find that I'm more busy focusing on surviving than I am being scared about dying. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes when you're eating your favorite dinner, you're too busy enjoying lasagna to be thinking about the ice cream that's coming next. You get it? So for me, if I'm in a landslide, for example, or if I'm in an area where there are lots of pumas, which has happened before as well, I'm busy taking precautions to make sure that nothing bad happens or that I'm going to avoid that danger, more so than I am scared about dying.
All right. Well, Lucy, I'm hanging out with a 3rd grade class in Elora, Ontario today, and we have a question for you here. You want to go ahead?
How old are you?
I am 37.
All right, 37, same age as me. Very cool. All right, let's jump to another live classroom. This time we're going to go to Mrs. Boyle's group, 3rd graders hanging out in Fort Benning, Georgia. Let me turn their microphone on for them. How are we doing, Georgia?
How many hours does it take you to walk a day?
Can you say that again for me?
How many hours does it take you to walk a day?
Well, that really depends on if I'm high in altitude or not. So typically I'll do 35 kilometers a day and I can get that done between 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. But if I need to cover that distance up in altitude, anything above 4,000 meters, there's half the oxygen available, which means that your body doesn't function as well because you have to take twice as many breaths to get the amount of oxygen that your body is used to. And so I tend to walk at half the speed that I would normally walk when I'm in altitude. And sometimes that means that I can't make the whole distance, which means that I'll be late, which means I'll run out of food for the next town.
All right, let's jump to another live classroom. This time we're going to go, oh, Mrs. Wafer. So she has an online school hanging out with her. They're kindergarten through grade 8. They're in Westchester. Let me turn on that microphone, but the students are located all over the place. but let me turn on her microphone. Hey, Miss Wafer, how are you doing today?
I am well. Thank you so much. So yes, our students are around the world and they are asking questions a lot about you and your experience in life. They did a little research about you. They've read about you. So Emily is in California. She's in 5th grade and she has a question about your accident that was talked about before you went on this trip. And then just quickly, Kodako is in Malaysia. She's in 8th grade and she's wondering how you keep in contact with your family.
Okay. So am I going to get the first, what was the first question?
About, oh, it was about your bike accident.
Okay, so what did she want to know specifically?
Oh, I think about how it prompted you. Was it something that prompted you to take this trip? I think that's what she was curious about. Yeah.
That's actually a myth. So a journalist wrote a story, not the accident, but a journalist wrote a story and then several other journalists used that information rather than interviewing me about an accident that I was in. And yes, I was in a very serious accident in a cycling competition. It left me paralyzed and I wasn't able to talk, but I was already midway through preparations for the expedition. So it didn't prompt me to go on the expedition, but actually it became a very big hurdle and did mean that I may not have been able to start. But I worked really hard and I had a lot of people supporting me to make sure that I didn't lose motivation. And they often believed in me more than I believed in myself. And I just had to trust my friends and my family to help me get through that really difficult period. And, you know, I was in so much pain after that accident. Somebody previously asked me during my trip if I've been fearful of death. And I haven't been, but there was a moment while I was in hospital where the pain had not been in control yet. It took them 2 days to get the pain management sorted out. And in that time, rather than being afraid of death, I was welcoming of death. You know, I really was just like, if this needs to happen, I'm totally okay with that. So that was a very interesting experience for me. And I certainly really appreciate being able to walk again and having the feeling of my body warming up, which is the feeling I got when I could move my legs again. That was very profound for me and a really, what I would consider a gift. And I'm so very appreciative. It was an awful experience, but I'm also very glad to have gone through it. And then to ask how I stay in touch with my family. It's difficult. When I'm in town, the first thing I do is send them a message. I let them know where I am, how I'm going, and we do lots of video communications. And I also send them postcards when I can, when there's a post office.
All right, awesome questions from online. We're gonna go to Mrs. Gertson's class. They're hanging out with us in Kansas. Looks like some 4th graders. Let's get their microphone on. There it is. How we doing, Kansas?
How did you decide on your path?
What made me decide?
On your specific path.
Oh, you mean how do I work out the trail? Well, I did a lot of research before I began and I drew up a trail, and within 2 weeks that all fell apart because I had to go a different way. And so now what I do when I get to town, among fixing all my equipment and buying food, I have to work out how I'm going to get to the next town. And here it's very easy because there's a cycling trail that I'm following. It's very remote, very difficult, and I can't understand how people drag their bikes through it because it's hard to hike it, let alone cycle it. But for now, that's what I'm using. And then typically because I don't know if a country is going to be, or an area within a country is going to be safe or not. So I depend very much on community input and find out from people if it's safe for me to go one way or if they would recommend I go a different way. And sometimes that means I have to walk further.
All right, thanks for that awesome question from Kansas. Lucy, I'm wondering, is Wombat close by? Can we say hi to Wombat if he's close by?
Yes, of course you can. Here we go. You ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Wombat, who's this?
I Wombat.
He's all right under here. Here's my feet. He's right underneath me, always.
Looks like my German Shepherd gate. So
He does look a lot like a German Shepherd, but actually, you're gonna get up. He's a little bit upset because he wants to go for a walk. Come here. Up, up, up. What's this? What's this? Come. He does not.
Saving up some energy for the next leg of the trail.
Absolutely. And also he's just a little bit annoyed that we haven't gone for an adventure today.
Fair enough. Well, let's jump to Mr. Kurd's class. They're hanging out with us in Virginia. Looks like some 5th graders. Let me turn their microphone on. How we doing, Virginia? Oops, looks like we hit at the same time.
Good, we're doing well. Hey.
What was the coolest things that you saw on your trail?
What was the
What was the coolest thing you saw on your trail?
Do you know, when I started at the very bottom of the world, the lowest city is actually on a group of islands. So I had to kayak to get from off the islands onto the mainland. And while I was kayaking, I had dolphins and whales and elephant seals come up right next to my kayak. That was pretty cool.
All right, that sounds pretty awesome. Very cool. Well, look, Lucy, we're gonna bring a few more questions in, but some classes might have to start ducking out shortly for period ends and such. So what's a good way if they want to send some questions to you? Is tweeting to you online, is that a good Twitter, a good option?
Yeah, if they want to tweet me, they can tweet me, or they can send me an email at hello@tanglesandtail.com.
All right, very cool. Well, let's take a minute now and let's join some of the classrooms. Let's see. Let's go back to Mrs. Wise's class, see if they have another question.
Yes, we do. Ready?
Okay. How do you cross into different countries? Do you have to go to a border or a certain spot?
Yes. So I do have to go to an official border, or if I'm crossing somewhere where there isn't one, it can be coordinated, but it takes a lot of work because somebody from both sides of the country has to meet me in a remote area, which is a lot of work. So actually, it's not so difficult. I just make sure that I coordinate or plan to walk through those border crossings and work that into my trail. And now that I have Wombat, I also have to make sure that I pass through a town beforehand where there is a vet who can give me a certificate of health and provide me with any vaccines that he may need specifically for the next country that I'm entering into. But otherwise, it's quite simple.
All right, great question. I see someone in Georgia, Ms. Boyle's class, right up front of the camera. So let's turn them on and see what they have to say.
How are you planning to get back to where you live from the...
I live in Australia. So Australia is on the other side of the world and not on the continent, which means that I either have to swim or get a plane. And I am not a very good swimmer. So I am going to take a plane with my dog.
All right, very cool. Let's see, Mr. Kurd's class, do you guys have another question?
I wanted to ask a question. How many hours of sleep did you get on a regular day?
5 hours.
That's not a lot. That's not a lot.
No, it's not a lot. Most people need a lot more sleep. But there are people who are outliers who don't need as much. So my whole life, I've really gone to bed at about midnight and gotten up at 5 and then gone for a run or something like that. But also when you're sleeping in a tent in an area that's you're not used to, even though you're asleep, you're a little bit more aware because you need to take care of yourself. And that's just a survival mechanism within your body. And so I will wake up quite a fair bit at night, but I'm also very lucky that I can recharge my batteries really, really quickly. And am often lying in bed because I go to bed when the sun goes down now so that I'm not wasting battery power on my torch. So I'm in bed at 7:30 and then I'll wake at midnight or 2 in the morning, ready to go. And then I just have to sit and wait and wait and wait until about 5 or 6 when the sun comes up.
All right. Very cool. 5 hours. That's good. I try to get at least 5 or 6. So yeah, for some people that works. Ms. Wafer, do you have another question from the online community?
We do. It's from Hannah Nikita in Minnesota. She's in 9th grade. And this is so funny because she did ask this before we saw Wombat. She asked, how well does your dog listen? And how did you train her? And have you or your dog ever been hurt in nature since you've been walking?
Yes. Okay. So Wombat's a boy, and the name Wombat means an animal that's only found in Australia. It's a marsupial. And he does listen, but he is going through a teenager phase, which means that sometimes he rebels a little bit, but ultimately it's just the two of us and he's pretty good. I've had trouble teaching him not to chase cows, but now he doesn't. So now he looks at llamas, and I have to be a bit careful with that as well. Just slowly teach him that chasing is inappropriate and unsafe, especially because he might one day chase a snake when I'm in the jungle, for example. And I teach him by positive reinforcement. So when he does something good, I praise him. And when he does something bad, rather than getting mad at him, I bring him over, I get him to do something I want, and then I tell him that he's doing the right thing. So that's probably the most effective thing that works with my particular dog. And have we ever been hurt? Yes, we have. I've been water poisoned twice, and I've had lots of blisters on my feet and my ankles. And actually my shoes have just worn out. So I'm now up to pair number 14, I think. Something like that. And because they broke, water was getting in. When I arrived in town here, I had 2 very big blisters under the toes of my feet, so that was causing a lot of pain. And then Wombat, he's eaten something very disgusting and nasty and gross. I don't know what it is, but he got a stomach infection and had bad diarrhea for a week. And he also was once harassing a horse who then kicked him, and then we had to wait a week while he fixed his sore thigh, which took about a week before he stopped limping, and then he was fine.
All right. So it sounds like Wombat can get into trouble from time to time.
Oh, yes. He's cheeky. He's a troublemaker.
All right. And Mrs. Gertson's class will give you guys the final question today. Your mic's on.
Okay, awesome. What do you do for fun when you're not hiking?
I eat. There is not much. I don't have much time in town, so I try and meet people and have lots of conversations and share recipes and learn how to make really yummy food. And because I'm so busy trying to get my trail sorted out and all the logistics and fix my gear and wash my clothes and just dry out from a big wet week, I don't have much time for other activities other than things that need to happen anyway. And I really love cooking. I really enjoy meeting people. And so sharing customs and cultures is something that I really enjoy doing on my off days.
All right. Very cool. Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to the classes on YouTube and all the classrooms who are tuning in right on camera with us today. Thanks for the awesome questions and spending some time with us. And Lucy, thank you so much for taking a break, sharing some of your story with us, some of the adventures so far. We're really excited to hopefully follow along and maybe catch you a few more times out on the trail and broadcast your story out to classrooms in North America.
Absolutely. And if the kids want to send me emails and letters from home with their family and show me a little bit of their home life, I absolutely would love that. So please tell your families about me. And if you want to write, I will write back. It just might take a few days.
All right. So cool. Well, the last thing we're going to do today is turn on all the microphones. Get really loud classrooms, a big goodbye and thank you, and then we'll sign off for today. So here we go. Microphones are on. All right. Awesome job, everybody. I knew you'd be up to the task. Wombat, Lucy, thanks so much. Tons of fun. And we look forward to doing another connection.
Thanks so much, guys.